People often complain because they don't conceptualize the value of philosophy. What does it do for us right now, sort of thing. Well, there's plenty going on that does things for you right now. The great question is even askable today. It's questionable today, askable that if we move to Mars, we're looking at interplanetary warfare. And we're talking back, steps back to gang mentality. The nearest thing in our history is the United States. And so, when you look at the value of philosophy is what the Constitution has afforded us in our world economy, and the peace that is prolonged. Now, within the Constitution, I didn't realize until I derived the laws of free will. They are in there, but they're not outlined. They didn't know what they were necessarily writing in particular. They just tried to outline freedoms as vaguely as possible. So my work went to accentuate that in philosophy, and I put in all my effort. So if I put in all my effort, I don't fail, typically, and I've left myself to my own judgments over the years, and any scrutiny whatsoever. I have tested the laws of free will boundlessly, and they have never failed. And you can correlate them through ideas. You find synonyms, and yeah, they are in the Constitution. But the thing about the Constitution is it says all men are created equally. I was working out the paradox philosophy to govern all cognitive life in the universe. And what that means is that no matter where we go, we can expand and we can be successful. So if we don't have that philosophy, that foundation, we sort of degrade cognitively and we become more degenerate species. Or we don't even know how to progress. And so our epitome is to maintenance the universe. If we are self-aware, our thesos is knowledge, understanding, wisdom. Well, what is the epitome of that? We can spread across the entire universe and basically own reality and collapse, or we can maintain reality and sustain indefinitely, at least theoretically. And until you really get into the physics of all that, this is about philosophy. This isn't about the physics that and all that. This is my value in philosophy when I started writing. I don't even know what you fucking call it. It's written all in paradoxes. It's outlining everything, so that everything's written in a paradox that I never really wrote down how the corruptions of choices. I only tried to make allegories because it's the best way to inspire thought rather than dictating thought. And there's a lot to it all. It's just like I already said, I don't want to repeat myself, you know what I mean? So this affords us, like the Constitution, to be capable of expanding across the universe, and to do so justly and self-awarely with self-awareness and cognition. And when you have a big nose, you get a lot of issues up in here. I think my whiskers keep tickling it, is what it is. Now I look like that funny guy from... Never mind. Anyway. Should I get a comb? Should I just start, combing my beard in the store? I'll stand there and be like... I just usually do that. It's the easiest way to get out of your mouth while it's growing. Anyway. Enough about my mustache. Ridiculous. I don't really know what else to say. It's just that's why I wrote that. People think I'm a communist. I'm actually an anti. My theories are way more complicated than the hypocrisy of Marxism. Or when I was delving into philosophy, I really started to notice where I would peak after paradox philosophy and free will philosophy is that's where you derive choices and you start to understand the fundamentals and the nature of man. Like in Big Bang Theory, they mention, I don't even know his name, but it's about the donkey. I would solve this question about the donkey that's stuck between two bales of hay, is that a man can live longer without food, but he needs water every so often. So that affords him the ability to go to the river, travel back to the food, go back to the river. That's how we are. I mean, that is essentially how we make choices. We make choices on the most beneficial, fundamental. We can never be truly selfless because we evolve to weed that out. The way we evolve is that any man who hates life and he's self-destructive, he weeds that out, and he leaves behind the people that he's selfless for. So that's there. I mean, hypocrisy's there, self-indulgence, and self-righteousness. Those are our three fundamental states of cognition. So between paradoxes, that's how we solve. That's how we make choices. And I wrote my allegory about the 1 versus 100 and my expansion of Plato's Cave, and that set me on the path to become a philosopher. Well, I always had the natural sense of philosophy as well. In the 4th grade, 5th grade is when this was. So they gave me the question of how do you define insanity, and I correlated it to a lack of self-awareness, in that Einstein's definition, repetition without change, well, we all repeat. I mean, we're all trying to better things, and we're expecting things to not work the same. I mean, that's kind of how entropy works, and quantum mechanics works, but it's the lack of self-awareness to change that defines the insane mind. And 6th grade, I remember getting frustrated about decimals and that we know nothing because we cannot actually find a perfect calculation. That sort of stuff theoretically drove me nuts. Made me think and think and think. Before that, I don't know anymore. I've had some whiskey. Like, my brain is so... It's really blessing to have racing thoughts because you can make quick conclusions and you don't get lost on these trails, and then you find vantage points. So if I want to call it vantage points, I don't know, vectors really between 2 points of entropic nature, if you want to relate it to physics, right? So as those are ideas, and so this is how you just try to guide thought without corrupting thought, and without controlling thought. Well, I think this cool little cup here. There's elephants on this side, and people are riding them, and the forest is being torn down or something. And then on the other side, you have happy elephants and their family. I love this fucking cut. I love elephants. They're so cool. But they aren't my favorite animal. Anyway, this is about philosophy, so try not to be bad. Even the cup, it represents things, right? It represents that paradox within nature and our impact. So it's my job as a philosopher to define but not define, because then you have another paradox there. So you define but you don't define, because you're not trying to control people. If we control too much, then we're just teaching people how to say the right things. And like Descartes, if you don't doubt, then you never know and you could only really technically understand. If that makes people will try to understand. I think as much as I have. I'm not trying to play a superiority complex, but trust me, I've spent years. I've spent my 10,000 hours. So that's it. I mean, that it affords us. It's not even by dictation, is the funny thing. So even if we dictate these laws and these rules, the thing is that this is how philosophy functions naturally, and this is how cognition develops. This is how free will sustains. And so this is literally how, through expanding across the universe, our species, if we have these naturally inherited philosophical traits, we will indefinitely become successful. There's other little issues and paradoxes in that, but that's not my job right now or anymore to outline all those funny things, because it's just, I'm already spent like I tired, you know. It's tired. And there's going to be some kid somewhere, all these ideas that I've implanted into society, any way that I could try to, that will correlate just as I have. And there's going to be another and another and another, and eventually we're going to find this guy that can handle all of that, you know. And then like the next, or maybe it'll just take a quantum computer. That could function. I've considered that. Potentially a quantum computer could be the source, but why take it away from people? I mean, the whole point is that we don't just grow to a certain point where we have this pimple and we pop the fucking thing, and I'm the pimple, and then we sustain back down to a fundamental level, expand ever so slightly again, and that works. Don't get me wrong, because I know it takes thousands of years to make a fundamental change in humanity. It's just, you gotta let those weirdos exist too. That's what it is. We hunt them, it seems. This isn't as cool as the Rembrandt mug that I have, though. That was really cool. Well, see, I would never find this thing. Anyway, how does he look? Does it, on video, does his eyes look at you like they do in real life? Because in real life, he looks at you and follows you around the room. And then he has different faces, too, at different angles. It's really fucking cool. That's why I quit painting, and I got to a point where I was just like, you know what? That's my first portrait tip, so I've never done a portrait before, other than sketches in school. And, why not? And I freehanded it, too. I didn't draw it out. So I did the whole freehanding. Normally I draw it, and then I paint. I wanted to see if I could get eyes and capture emotion. So I captured the emotion, I thought. Well, it turns out he's got like 30 different emotions. And whether or not, because I have funny eyes, so my eyes do things that normal eyes don't do. And since I'm partially eidetic, which means that images can sustain, and lighting and stuff like that sustains my vision, that I see different faces. So maybe it's just me. Maybe. And then if I tell people that, they think you're crazy. So, fuck 'em. Yeah. Anyway. That's it. I mean, that's, for the most part, the purpose of my philosophy is that whether or not it's there, that's kind of what you need. And it's always best, you know, we inspire thought. We get a lot of people who feel stuck when they inspire thought. But they get too simplified and stressed out. So, like I was mentioning earlier before I went way off topic, is that like Marxism. So, Karl Marx, brilliant philosopher. He started making choices. That's where it leads into communism. So we impart those choices onto this philosophy to corrupt it, and that's why I wrote it all in Paradoxes. Which is very difficult, actually. It's extremely difficult. And of course, you kind of want to make it poetic or romantic, just because I like having some sort of charm, you know. I guess as long as we have the imagination. As long as we have the imagination, when you're inspiring an image in the mind, and you're doing so through paradox, you can speak to a larger margin of people. And there's so much to say that that's why I drink so much. Haberdashery.